Good morning, everyone. Nolan Bowerly here, Stacking Sats. Launching a show today that will continue to the sale of my book. I've got a new book coming out, so I figured a show would be the best way to get people to know about my book because my book's pretty cool and it's going to help push Bitcoin along. Because it's the first time everyone's written a story about the moving edge of violence, basically what Bitcoiners have to worry about and why they're going to be targeted. So it's a book, it's a murder mystery on some of the first big high profile Bitcoin murders. So look out for that. But the show's not really about my book. My book is an extension of something I've been working on for a long time. And so I'll give you a quick background for those of you who don't know me. I just think it's important. A lot of people do, but for those who don't, I'm trained as a lawyer. I worked in the Canadian Senate Banking Committee for several years. So I graduated in 08. I began in 09. So we're going to be talking about the white paper today, October 31st. Here's a fun anecdote. October 31st, 2009, I was a lawyer in Japan. And a weird story, on my way to scaling Bitcoin in 2019, which is the largest Bitcoin conference, I think, in the world for developers focused on developing on Bitcoin. So I went there in 2009 and it was in Japan. So I ended up, my wife's half Japanese. I go to Japan pretty often. It's just her uncles and cousins live there. Her dad came over here, but, a lot of family over there. So the conference was there. I brought my whole family over, and we ended up staying when we first arrived in Osaka in a small little Airbnb. First night in, wanted to go out for some food, walking around. Where could we go? Not this restaurant, not that restaurant. Finally, I see one. I say, okay, let's just go in here. So we walk in, and the guy sitting behind a counter. It's a little curry shop, and he looks at me and he goes, "I know you." And I said, "What do you mean you know me? What are you talking about?" And I go, "I'm on TV sometimes for Bitcoin." So I thought, geez, did he see me on TV or something? That doesn't make any sense. I'm in Japan. I'm only on CNBC and CNN and American stations. And then my wife walked in right behind me and he goes, "Rachel Ikura." She has a very strange Japanese name. Ikura is not that common. And I said, "What's going on?" Well, it turned out that was the guy I was partying with 10 years earlier, October 31st, 2009. And I explained the story to him. I said, "You have no idea what's going on here, man. This is crazy. Like, I've been out of Japan for years. I'm coming back. If you remember, you and I together that night, Halloween night 2009, we shouldn't have been partying. We should have been on the internet looking for this white paper or joining a mailing list or something, because that would have worked out." But anyway, there he is. I walked in. I remembered him. He remembered my wife. Met the kid. Had the Japanese curry. It was great. Had a good laugh. And he took Bitcoin at the store, which is amazing. And he was already into Bitcoin, and we had a great time. It was hilarious. I mean, it's a simulation for sure. What are the odds? 10 years later, you meet a guy at a Bitcoin thing. Anyway, it's great. But that's not really what the show's about. It's not about anything to do with the simulation, although we might, talk about it every now and again. And it's not about Bitcoin conferences or anything like that. But a fun anecdote, nevertheless. What the show is about, and what my story is about fundamental change, right? It's about the mega politics of what we're going through here. The same way that the Reformation, right, changed the order of Europe from the Middle Ages to the nation state era, right, when countries took over. Because what happens in Reformation, before that, you have lords, and you've got all these, knights, and everyone has an allegiance to each lord, and that's sort of the logic of the place, right? After that, once gunpowder is invented, once these modern armies are there, kings, of course, go with these mercantile classes and are able to, support these large armies, and it completely changes the world these people live in. They went from medieval knights, chivalrous feudalism, to modern nation states, and the beginning of the modern world. Now, none of this observation is on mine. Everyone who's been in Bitcoin for a long time has read the book The Sovereign Individual, and this is kind of the thesis of that story, right? So The Sovereign Individual, if you haven't read it yet, you should read it. You don't really have to read it front to back. You can pull a Naval Ravikant. I don't know if you guys ever picked this up, a Naval Ravikant. One of the greatest hacks I've ever learned from anybody. You don't have to read a book front to back. You need to be told that. If you didn't know it already, you feel a responsibility when you get a book to read it front to back. It's not true. You can actually just pick it up and read different pieces. And I didn't even know that was possible until, I mean, I did, but I didn't think you had permission and you weren't serious if you didn't do it that way. But it's true. There's so many books, so much time, can't read them all. Might as well take what you can get from them. You can do that with my book. Not as well, because it's a story. So a little harder to skip pages, but not so complicated. So, but I urge you not to skip pages because it's a novel. But what can I say now? I already admitted I skip pages in novels too. So the show is really about this shift, right? So I'm serious when I'm comparing the white paper to Reformation, right? I'm serious because my argument here is that the change Bitcoin brought about is as great as the beginning of Protestantism in Europe, right? It's as significant because it totally alters, and the printing press, right? So the Protestantism came with the printing press and the gunpowder and all that stuff. So it was all at once. A little bit like today, the internet and everything has come at once. So in my story, in order to explain this shift, instead of telling and predicting, I wrote a science fiction novel, right? I wrote a science fiction novel. And in this world, and in the way that the printing press and gunpowder and the nation states and everything changed the feudal world in the modern times, what I'm saying here is that in our nation state world, where two important powers are at play driving this thing forward, the Federal Reserve and income taxes, right? So they came about around the same time. Teddy Roosevelt is the man more or less who invented the modern executive branch, right? The Hail to the Chief, dun, 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 right? That was him. He ordered that played when he entered a room. The whole, foreign policy, speak softly and carry a big stick, this is all TR, right? So TR defined a recognizable modern presidency that we would all look at and say, oh, that's the president, right? Because the president wasn't like that. After Lincoln, the role of the president changed. Everyone said, well, Lincoln's become, for all the great he did, there was a lot of worry about what an emperor he'd become. He'd given himself a tremendous amount of powers, understandably, right? Understandably, I think we all support Abraham Lincoln. I think if Abraham Lincoln would have asked me to vax up, I would have done it, right? He's the kind of guy who, if he's taking your freedoms away, I think I'm going to give him trust for a little while anyway. But that's not here nor there. What happened was the presidency after Lincoln becomes almost anonymous. Who can name the presidents between Lincoln in 1860s and TR at the beginning of the 20th century? There's a couple you can name. I know them, but they're not like off the top of your head. U.S. Grant and all these guys are great. We know them, but it's not like there's not a lot of them, right? U.S. Grant was a particular case. So you've got all this stuff going on, and finally the presidency, and then it's the presidency evolves in that direction from TR. I'm not saying TR created the presidency that we know today. It is a living organism and should change. It was designed to change and has changed and has responded to times, right? And in particular, his nephew, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, really expanded the role of the president, right? And that role ends up becoming the blueprint for the Cold War presidents. And then that never really ended, right? We had the 2000 election in America, which was, a lot like a popularity contest because the attention to the role had gone down, but it wasn't really forcing it to change any longer, right? It was the same job. And Obama sort of parked himself into that job. And I'd say Obama is the beginning and the end. He's the beginning of social media awareness and a new form of presidency, a new form of executive branch wielding of power. And Trump was very similar, right? As far as I can tell, very similar. Using social media, directly appealing to people, going around all kinds of other institutions, altering reality in a lot of ways that we didn't know you could do because they understood the job itself could be changed and manipulated at its fundamental level. But the thesis of my show is that you've got the US dollar, created in 1912, 1911 or whatever, TR tried to stop it, right? Don't forget that. TR came back for a third term to try and stop it. Got shot in the gut just to stop it and kept speaking for the Bull Moose Party. But it didn't work out, and they created the Federal Reserve in the dead of night. But another institution that came with it, like I mentioned, is the IRS, right? They came together. And my theory is they die together, right? I've believed that. People have said when I first explained Bitcoin, when people maybe weren't even as suspicious or dismissive of it, and this is like the 2013 period, and I'd say, they can do this. And then people would say, well, how are you going to pay taxes? How are the government going to level taxes? I said, well, that's their problem. I mean, it's going to be hard, but they're going to have to figure that out. It's not going to be like it was before. They can't just deputize the payment networks to do the job for them, just like in policing. I mean, that's how I came to Bitcoin, right? I was studying finance, terrorism financing and money laundering for the Canadian Senate along those FATF guidances, and we call it FinTrack in Canada. It's called FinCEN in the United States, and it's the $10,000 you sign when you cross a border. Do I have $10,000? No, blah, blah, blah. So that regime, I found out, does really nothing. They don't catch anybody. Like, it's just a bunch of bureaucrats patting themselves back saying there is no money laundering. But I was able to prove to a bipartisan group of senates that it wasn't true, right? That they didn't do anything, that they weren't catching anybody, that they were just deputizing the entire system and getting people to pay them. I had a unique advantage because Canada, for banking law, is the opposite of the United States. The federalism, is almost identical in Canada and the United States. Very few things are different. One of the most important things that is different is banking law. It's in fact one of the reasons why we created Canada in the first place. What we did was we wanted to finance East-West. After the Civil War, America woke up, the most powerful country in the world, and England said, well, we're not going to fight them again. Like, they're out of control now. They got machine guns and ironclads and all this kind of stuff. Like, they're not, we can't just go fight them like we used to. So they abandoned Canada. They said, forget it, you guys are done. And America was building a lot of private rail, right? North-south private rail to extract resources, particularly through to Chicago. And this was in the northern Reconstruction and boom time. But Canada was very worried about this because Canada was still stuck at the two oceans, right? There's nothing really yet in the middle. It was British Columbia and Vancouver, which was a British territory, and then the maritime provinces, kind of like our New England in Canada. We have a couple provinces out on the ocean, and then Quebec and Ontario were also part of this new Canadian thing, and that would be, like a bit of the Midwest, and in every other way, Quebec is Texas, except it's Catholic, right? It's full of energy, full of resources. They think of themselves as their own country, and they even did back then. So this is a unique spot, right, in Canada. So these guys didn't know what to do, really, and England wasn't going to pay. So what they said, and they weren't going to pay for anything. That was the main issue. England was not going to fight another war against the United States after the Civil War, realizing it wasn't going to go very well, or at least it was going to be very difficult. And Canada was just sitting there saying, okay, well, we're either going to get gobbled up by the United States, or we can fund East-West Infrastructure to create a country, right? So instead of allowing private interests to develop all these rail lines north-south, Canada said we're going to develop it east-west, and we're going to finance it through federal banking measures. So the federal government was like the original reserve banking at this time. They basically did it for that reason, right? We're going to backstop our early banks. We're going to make sure these early banks don't go bankrupt because there's no England to call, and we're going to build rail, and we're going to build canals, and we're going to build it east-west, and then we'll have a country. Right. Luckily, America had no appetite for war or anything after the Civil War, so they're like, yeah, sure, go make your country. I don't care. We're not going to. Okay, we'll build our train lines into your east-west, and everything will be good, which is what happened, right? So we got a country out of it. But the banking piece is important, and it becomes political. So in when I was working there, now to be honest, I wasn't just a Senate staffer. It was a bit of an executive branch spy, for lack of a better word, right? The executive branch, there's no manual on how to do it, but you have a job there, and you speak with ministers in the executive branch. You kind of know what they want in the news, right? You understand they want to make these committees generate headlines and news. And our committee was not there to generate political headlines necessarily. Like, it wasn't about fighting just for the sake of fighting, but you wanted to carve out a little wedge and a niche and get attention, right? Now, what we heard in our, we were it was the conservative party. I was part of the more libertarian wing of it, the small government part of it. And our argument was that the states themselves, right, the states themselves, the provinces, were having, so the federal banking, right, it's a federal jurisdiction. We regulated it. But the provinces, the states, have co-op abilities, right? They can create these co-ops, kind of like a bank. They're really popular in rural areas. They're really popular for funding all kinds of farming, and you have them in the United States too. So I'm sure a lot of countries have these co-op banks. They're not the same as a bank. What happened was, though, these co-op banks had the same FinCEN, FinTrack, FATF reporting requirements as the large banks in Canada, right? But the difference is the co-ops aren't allowed to organize in a corporate way. They can't organize with a corporate federal head office in Toronto like a bank has. They can't stuff all their compliance there, right? The way these co-ops work is they're just a co-op for a little village, for a town, for an area. And it's not, you're not part of a national network. You're part of a small place that takes deposits and gives loans, and it's pretty conservative. But all of their restrictions were then amplified because they had the same reporting requirements as a large bank. And they would just tell us, like, look, we're a small co-op, we're in a rural part of Canada, we've got 5 staff, we have to hire 1 compliance staff, right? That's a 1 less loan officer. That's 1 less person who's going to help us make our, the people in our village richer, right? So they have to hire. I mean, we hear that a lot, right? Because you hear lobbyists and all kinds of people that say this is a problem, right? So I knew it was a problem, and I said, okay, well, I got to find out what's going on here. This reporting requirements, and we started looking into FATF, and then we found out they didn't do anything, and it was a big scam, and the senators got really angry, both sides, liberals. Conservatives at the time, they were coming to us asking, the $10,000 reporting requirement. You hear it a lot in the States now. They got the $600 thing that Yellen was going on about. We'll get to that in the show sometimes because it's as insane as anything. But all of these different restrictions, right? All of these different limits are so confusing and difficult that it's hard for any of these little institutions to be successful. I showed the senators it was a big scam. They were not prosecuting anybody. They didn't get away with anything. They didn't lower that threshold. They tried to lower it to like $1, like Australia or something, like from 10,000 to $1 or something absurd. We said, forget it, get out of here. You guys are collecting data on people at a rate that we can't even understand. But it was in those hearings. This is 2012, right? And we're going on about all this stuff and and I'm trying to get headlines, and we're doing it like it looks like we're standing up for the provinces and the small co-ops. This is going well, But one day, out of nowhere, this fellow says to me, he goes, yeah, because we're talking to the FBI people, right? He goes, yeah, you see this Bitcoin thing. And I said, what's that Bitcoin thing like? Because they're talking about how hard it was to report, right? Financial transactions. And I started looking at it, right? And I said, well, that's, I didn't think too much. Like everyone tells that story. I didn't think too much, Wow, you can buy drugs with it. That's pretty cool, And then I started to learn more about it. And because it came up politically, there's a skier in Canada. She won a couple of Olympic medals named Nancy Greene, when she was a skier before she was married. She used to, do advertisements for candy bars and stuff. And she won a couple of gold medals in the 68 Winter Olympics and was a senator by then. Big libertarian, really big libertarian. I was chatting with her, and she told me about it. I said, I just heard about that thing, right? And she's saying, yeah, I was with all these libertarians. They're going on and on and on about it. They said it's the greatest thing ever. And I said, well, I mean, I got to learn more about it now. So I went and learned about it. And luckily, through her and through a few others, I got the Senate to do a study on Bitcoin, right? I got the witnesses. We got Andreas. It was great, right? But ever since, and I quit the job then, I worked for CoinDesk. I've worked for Kraken. I've worked for lots of different folks in the industry, but mostly CoinDesk and Kraken for quite a while. But the older CoinDesk, I still do a bit of advising for them. I still advise the president. I still help out with the consensus event, and still definitely interested in getting that place to fulfill its role in the industry. But turning to this, it's, I realized then, and I have been talking about it since then, it's almost binary, right? if it was going to reach that point, I had to imagine what happens if Bitcoin takes over entirely, right? I have to imagine what happens if it takes over entirely. And I have been in a position where I've been lucky enough to be able to think about that for years, right? I left the Senate in 2015, right away worked in Decentral in Toronto with the early, I was there for Ethereum launching, like the day it started, right? I wasn't there for the sale and all that, but I was there when it started with the founding team. Everyone was there, Vitalik, everybody. I was living in Toronto at the time and working out of that office and starting to write this novel. Frankly, right then I started to write this novel, and I've been working on this novel since. Really since then, because not a lot of people had the time. Not a lot of people were able to just spend energy and effort focusing on what the world would look like if hyper-Bitcoinization happened, right? And instead of a novel, instead of a textbook, I chose to write a novel. And what I want to share in this show, is the mind frame, right, the mindset that I think is most useful beyond the book. The book is going to help show you tangibly what Bitcoin and AI and all these things are going to look like together. But the mindset that it requires to go through this here is more of a breakup. Right? That's why I call this show The Breakup. And that's why I want to use this frame every day to bring up news stories that show you why this world was abandoned so quickly, right? Why after this did that old feudal world, within a generation, not even a generation, a small amount of time, a matter of years, completely forgotten and erased, and a joke, really a joke. And now I'm saying that this white paper day marks the same amount of change in a similar time frame. It won't take much longer. I don't predict this is going to take much longer. This sucker's going down, and one more halving, two more halvings. 8 years is as long as I can give it. I think. I think we got a shot in 4. I really do. COVID, thank you. Of all the terrible things that have happened. Here's my theory. The only this pandemic is a terrible thing. Real, dangerous. People are dying. But that's the only reason why you haven't heard Bitcoiners brag more, right? Bitcoiners predicted this, right? They said anything that happens next, they didn't say pandemic, although pandemic was an option, right? But anything that happens next is going to force this reaction on the Federal Reserve and the money printers. So be careful, right? Now, we all imagine in these years coming up to this, it was just going to be some Wall Street bros who blew a tire or something like that crazy hedge fund the other day. And, I can't remember what it was called, all that money they lost. Just crazy, right? 100x leverage on weird things and every bank involved. So we thought it was going to be something like that, right? We didn't know it was going to be a pandemic, and because the bodies are still being counted, right? You don't hear Bitcoiners, maybe all of them, maybe even myself. I sort of went radio silent for a long time. I'm not going to go tell everyone the good news right away, right? And especially when I was in New York for the pandemic, man, my neighbors died, right? It sucked. So dangerous, but Bitcoiners have been biting their tongue, and now it's going to start coming out more because new dangers have arisen. So the breakup mindset for me is what's important here. And what we're going to do to induce the breakup mindset, right, is give you some reasons, right? We're going to go through news stories every day, 1 or 2, not a lot, 1 or 2, but they're going to be the other side of the trade. Right? It's the other side. It's not just stack sats, right? It's not just believe in, how Bitcoin can, improve your time preference, change consumption habits, all of which I believe, all of which I have already seen manifest in myself, right? I know the difference between saving money and, not having to use your IQ to be able to save money, right? That's the main advantage, right? Like, I don't think you need an IQ of 130 to be able to beat the bankers and the policymakers, which is what is required today. What is required today is a Series 7 Wall Street license, right, to be an accredited investor, and a super high IQ. That's just to save money. That's just to be even, right? That's just stability. That's what's been robbed from us. That's what we're going to build this pivot off of, right? What was robbed from everybody was savings should be easy. Saving is easy. right? Hey, we made it hard. We made it so hard. We made it so hard. We made it impossible, right? I mean, look at me. I came out of uh, top law school in Canada, one of the top. You know what I mean? Like the Georgetown level in America, right? Pretty good. Like not but a little different than Georgetown because it's older and it's got reputation. A lot of our prominent, it's got big, credibility behind it. But I went there, so I know the problems. But anyway, here's the story. I come out of law school, right? Not much debt. I had a ton of scholarships. Came out of law school, nice job in Japan, smacked by the financial meltdown. Came to the Senate, right? But I lived in Toronto at the time. So I'm working in the Senate in Ottawa. It's a bit like doing a Washington, Toronto commute, right? It's kind of the same deal. So I'm living in the Senate. And I'm living in Toronto. And a person on a Senate salary, I was making a little under 100 grand. I couldn't afford a house. No way. Forget it. Like, and I'd missed the chance at that, right? We already had Cantillon effect in Toronto for quite a while, right? Cantillon effect being cheap money produces a market for houses to go up so high because there's enough buyers and sellers that they can just sell within themselves. But that leaves, part of the population behind. So I don't normally have a problem with the gap between the rich and the poor. I won't say I will. I don't, right? Or I do. I don't. I don't have a problem with that normally. I do have a problem with the gap between the rich and the poor, right? Not if it's because people got rich. That's fine. But if they got rich at the exclusion of others because of a policy decision and it actually manufactures class division that is almost inescapable, you're in trouble, right? So picture me. Like, this is how easy it was for me to understand Bitcoin. I graduate into the financial crisis and the housing goes nuts in Toronto. I mean, crazy, 20, 30% a year, right? But that doesn't count for inflation. So I'm listening to central bankers every day. That's my job. I got Mark Carney there telling me, oh, no, it's okay. We got tools in our toolbox. He's coming to me in my office. He's coming to my, where we do our hearings, twice a year, telling me all this stuff. And I hear the same stuff every time, right? It's the same. Like, why does he keep saying they have tools? What's the tool, right? Is it that? Like, is it just cheap money? Okay, that's a tool, I guess. So they kept doing it. And, there was no way I was going to be able to buy a house or have a normal life, right? I mean, it wasn't failure to launch or anything like that. I mean, I didn't have extravagant spending. I did okay. But I knew something was wrong, right? Because I'd been told, you just assume you get a good job, you go to a good school, you're good, right? Well, I did all that. I did everything right. I couldn't have done it better, right? I couldn't have. What are you going to do better than that, right? It didn't work, right? It didn't work. So I learned about Bitcoin right away. I had a very, my appetite was there for it. So people will tell us, well, if you, what was I saying? Yeah, anyway, let's get to the story. Let's get to the news story of the day. And this is an important one. This is really fun. It's with Elon Musk. And I mean, he couldn't be funnier, And people in Bitcoin, I know you're going to say, oh, Elon, he talks about Dogecoin. And then, why does he fucking make people poor? They're losing their money with shit coins. Look, the way I see it is, I don't know what level Elon Musk is operating on. I don't know what enemies he's taking down. When I look at it, I say, and I'm mind reading, but I see someone who's trying to take down the SEC. I mean, he's on our side, right? He sees these big, hulking, stupid bureaucracies and says, these guys got to go, just like we do, right? He sees that, I think anyway, we are at not just a generational change, epochal change, right? Not generational change, epic change. And we can go back in that great book, The Sovereign Individual, and you can see there's a line, right? Impoverished, grasping, and extravagant. Just as government today offers poor value for money it collects, so did the church at the end of the 15th century, right? So if you go back to the end of the 15th century, the church is, oh, I'm poor, I can't do anything. They're taking everyone's money, right? Everyone's giving them money. They got a new feast, they got a new thing, you got to get the candles, we're going to do another pilgrimage, we're going to go walk, right? But none of this was working. Like, the walking wasn't alleviating any poverty, the church feasts weren't doing anything, it was all a scam, right? Like, more money, though. They kept begging for more. We need more money. And of course, in the end, who pays? The innocents pay, right? The losers, everybody, the plebs, right? And then that's what makes Elon so funny. So Elon Musk, let me show you this story. Elon Musk, right? He's responding to a CNN fake news story. Oh, wow, CNN fake news, right? So CNN wrote a story that 2% of Elon Musk's wealth, right? 2%, $6 billion, they say. So 2% is $6 billion. 2% of his wealth could alleviate all world hunger. That's what they say, right? They said it. CNN wrote a story. CNN. But Elon Musk, you gotta love him. He tweets back, if the World Food Program can describe on this Twitter thread exactly how $6 billion will solve world hunger, I will sell Tesla stock right now and do it. He just says you're gonna do it. So, but then he adds, but it must be open source accounting. Right? So the public sees precisely how the money is spent. Fair enough, right? Fair enough. But of course, David Beasley, the executive director and Nobel Peace Prize winner from 2020, right? He took it on behalf of the food program. He says, "Oh, they're fake news, but it's complicated, and we feed everyone, and we're doing our best, and da 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 da." They're lying. So of course, Elon right away shares the story. Well, what happened here? And it was that story, if you remember, 2 years ago, the UN food program. I shouldn't laugh. This is not funny. This is dead serious. It's not funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's terrible. I shouldn't laugh. The UN food program, right, in Africa, was caught. Employees, people who work for them, people on their sacred missions, right, were selling the food for sex. All right, that's what they did. They sold that food for sex. Crazy, right? So the World Food Program chief, and they won the Nobel Prize not long after. I don't know what's going on there. That's sickening. So David Beasley, blah, 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 blah. It's hard. It's so hard. I'm so poor. We don't have any money. It's wrong. They shouldn't have said that. He said, oh, CNN, fake headline. No, I agree with you, right? But here's where Elon puts it into another level. He says it must be open source accounting, so the public sees precisely how the money is spent, right? And then he says, oh, but then he says, oh, it's hard. We can't do that. But then he comes back and says, please publish your current and proposed spending in detail so people can see exactly where the money goes. Sunlight is a wonderful thing. Now, I warned Elon on Twitter, he's got to be careful for using the word sunlight because CNN might write another headline and say that he told the UN food program chief to drink bleach. So be careful about that. I don't want him to say that he drank bleach. Okay. Now, what I love about this is that Elon actually says he's going to do it, right? So if they just show how, he'll pay for it, right? But of course, it's a scam. Of course, this is another example of those impoverished, what did they call them in, what was it again? Impoverished, grasping, and extravagant. If that doesn't describe current government, they have all the money. They're talking about taxing us at 1,000,000%. What are they talking about, right? We need more money, more. It's so hard. We need more money. Okay, well, you have it all. And then you can print more as you've been doing. Like you can take it that way too. So just figure it out. Like leave this alone. So Elon Musk, he really got that one right. And I think a perfect example. And I'm going to try and do one of these every day. I mean, that's the show. Okay, this is the show. I'm going to take these things, and I hope to persuade you, right? I hope to persuade no coiners, newbies, that it's not about one money. It's not about the money being better. It's not about accounting, right? Like when people get into this, Austrian school and Keynesian, I'm not even going to go there ever. I don't know. Like for me, it's psychology, right? There is no math, right? Like we talk about numbers, but it's not math, if that makes more sense, right? We talk about numbers. Money involves math, but it's not really math, right? It's numbers, not math, if you catch my drift. And the reason it's not that, and the reason it's not math, right? It's numbers and not math, is because it's really a psychology engine. We have to believe in it, right? We have to want it and say this is good and not good, and it's got to do things for us that mean something. And today, the money just doesn't mean anything, right? It's garbage. It's really garbage. And people, to understand that, need to take this breakup mentality. And I think that's what will help, right? We've got to mock, we've got to sit here and say, well, I can't have half of it, right? I can't have some things. This is a breakup. This is we're done. Like we're out of here, right? We're done. We're done with all of it, right? The taxes, the audacity, right? The audacity. So we're going to keep working at it. Now, there's another part to making the future bright for all of us, right? So there's the breaking up. That's part of the formula. You got to break up with the fiat system, right? You got to break up with it. But there's another part, right? And then the other part is easy, right? There's another part: stacking sats, saving your money in Bitcoin, right? Getting over that hump. The third part, and I think this is going to be an important one, is royalty, right? So if we're all going to be kings, right? If we're all, so here's how it goes. We went from being plebs, and there were lords and kings, right? And then the plebs took the place of the lords closer to the king by being merchants and capitalists, and they created new institutions, and those were the things that brought you closer to the king, right? And we certainly have diminished the role of kings and queens, and it's great, right? But the next stage is we're all kings, we're all queens, we're all fabulous, right? Whatever you are, king, queen, whatever you want to be. And that's how we get there, right? That's what it looks like. That's what white paper day means. It means that while you were a pleb, you're actually a king. The kings are plebs. The plebs are kings, right? Bob Dylan said it, right? The loser now will be later to win, right? And that's where we're headed. And that's what I hope my book can help pave the way for. I know Bitcoiners are, obsessed with purity, and there's a moral standard. I get it. I really do. I mean, I've been around the whole industry, institutional side throughout Wall Street. I mean, I worked for DCG, for God's sakes. I saw exactly what goes on with the sweethearts and everything, right? And those guys are great. I mean, I'm not saying it against them. But I know what goes on over there. But that does not, to me, mean that there's nothing else out there. And by that, I mean, I've created something called a royalty token. Right? It's just for my book. It's not related to anything else. Right? It's not even out yet. We'll see if I even do it. I'm trying to build it on Bitcoin. But for me, it's a way for someone to earn their first Bitcoin, right? So every day now I'm going to be releasing parts of my book, chapters, just for free. I just want to get people in, get people to see the style. I've never, shared this stuff before, and it's pretty good. I've got a lot of good reviews from a lot of celebrities. You'll see them, celebrities on Twitter, like folks that you'll recognize in the Bitcoin space that have read it and gave me good feedback and, good comments. So it's a real thing, right? And I'm going to be giving away chapters. But I created something called an artist royalty token. And what I hope is reading my book, The Satoshi Wedding Murders, will lead to people earning their first Bitcoin, right? Because if you read my book and if you buy it, you're going to get a coin, right? The coin is a percentage of the total amount of coins. So however much you spend on the book, there's only going to be so many. But the point is, you get a bit of the coin. I'm going to take all of my sales, which I'll do on Amazon and all the other platforms. I'm going to turn that into Bitcoin, right? I'm going to put it in a pool. The coins of mine that you get just for reading my book, you don't have to buy my coin. My coin is not for sale. I don't want it traded secondary markets. None of that's going to happen, right? It's not for that. I'm not trying to pump the coin. It's not related to other books. It's not a platform. It's not a blockchain. It's nothing, right? It's just future revenues of my book in Bitcoin. If you have 1% of my coins, right? And I make enough Bitcoin from sales, right? I'll sell it in dollars, get Bitcoins, put the Bitcoins there. Your money, your, art will unlock it, and you can take out Bitcoin. If it works, that's what we're going for, right? So I want my book to lead people to getting their first Bitcoin, right? That's what I'm going for. And I think these arts artist royalty tokens are going to be a good way to distribute Bitcoin to more people in the world. So glad you're along for the ride. We're going to come at you every day. This show shouldn't be this long normally. I don't know what I'm going to do for the time, but should be around this length. Anyhow, go to my website, nolanbarley.com. I'll put the link to chapter 1 in the description later. Otherwise, find me on Twitter. I'm CountBTC on Twitter. And look out for my next episodes. Thank you.